on otherwise complicated topics. Joining me today is Dr. Randy Olson. He's in town for the Society of Integrative and Comparative Biology annual meeting, and that goes back to the complication that we were talking about. You're a former professor, got your PhD from Harvard, and then something changed, and you kind of turned Hollywood. Take us through that a little bit.
That's exactly right. In fact, the big theme that we're pushing now is this little discovery we've got, what we call a narrative template of and, but, and therefore. It turns out every story can be brought down into that, so I can tell you my life story using this template, which is that I was a professor of marine biology and I received tenure, but then I realized I was more interested in the broad communication of science and information. Therefore, I resigned from my professorship, moved to Los Angeles, went to film school at the University of Southern California, and have been making films ever since.
So that is your story in a nutshell, but the goal is to get other people to use a similar model and get the message out in a different way.
That's right. It's to help everybody take these enormous amounts of information and distill them down to what's the story at the core of it all.
Right.
What's the narrative center. And this ABT template turns out to be the magical tool that everything can be boiled all the way down to that. We could even use it for any movie that's ever been made. I can tell you the story of a little girl in Kansas who was bored, but then a tornado swept her to the land of Oz, and therefore she had to set off on a journey to find her way back to Kansas.
I think I've heard that story. So one of the topics that you've covered recently is global warming. One of your documentaries called Sizzle. Compare that to Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth. That was back in 2006, and this is a different way to present a similar message.
Yeah, this one has a sense of humor.
Right.
And it doesn't paint a pretty picture, basically.
Yeah.
I think Gore's movie was well-intentioned. He tried to paint a simple picture that we're all unified here in solving these problems of global warming, but it wasn't the truth.
Mm-hmm.
About half of the American public still isn't really buying what the scientists are trying to tell them. And that's a huge and even dangerous disconnect that we've got. The science world, 98, 99% of the scientists all say this is a very serious issue, and half the public just still ain't buying it. Although I think you guys are around here a little bit because you've had some pretty severe climate change issues. And so that's the divide that we've got to overcome, is somehow we've got to get that serious message out to the public in a more effective way, and at the core of that challenge is storytelling and narrative structure.
You've also been able to enlist the help of some of Hollywood's finest actors, Jack Black, Henry Winkler, just to name a few. How did you get them involved?
That was a project I did on ocean conservation issues.
Yeah.
And the oceans have got some of the biggest challenges of all, and all kinds of crises around the world. So we pulled together for one exercise. It was a public service announcement that I did that ended up being hugely successful, scored over $10 million in free airtime, and they created a bad symphony for the oceans and then said, imagine if we thought, today's declining oceans were as beautiful as we think this music is. And that's the crisis. And the good news is that lots changed in the last 10 years since we put that out. A lot of the big conservation groups are starting to make some progress on this, and people are coming around. So it's not all bleak, but there's a lot of work to be done.
What are some of the other major issues, I guess, we're facing today?
The climate issue is the #1 issue.
Yeah.
And around the world, and we've got still escalating carbon emissions and the problem of what we're doing to the atmosphere, and we're seeing the changes now, and it is real, and it's just got to be addressed. And it's also translating into other things such as sea level rise and the acidification of the oceans. So these are large-scale problems for which the communication effort is at the core of it all.
Right.
Until you can convince the people it's a problem, you're not going to make any headway. And when the people putting the information out there aren't doing a good job of connecting with the people with it, then that's the source of the crisis.
Back to the communication thing once again. Talk about your role at the conference this week here in Austin.
I am here to promote one thing, which is this ABT template. I feel like Ron Popeil and his pocket fisherman. This is that powerful and important of an innovation that it can be used by everybody, not just the science world. I do a lot of work now with business conferences and with doctors and all different professions, because everybody's got this challenge in this world of information overload. How do you take all of this stuff and shrink it down? And people have talked about for a decade the idea of the elevator pitch, which is the one sentence that tells your whole story.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first time we found an actual narrative template, which is the and, but, and the therefore, and every story can be boiled down into those three elements. In fact, I could tell you that there are lots of news shows in Austin, but the best show of all is right here at KXAN, therefore everybody should watch your show.
I like that story. Do you ever miss the classroom?
You know what, I've come full circle, and I am now back basically doing the same old thing
That's true.
now that I do workshops, working with all these science folks. And in fact, tomorrow at this conference, after my big talk tonight, we'll have a smaller group that will be doing the workshop, and they're bringing in their own stories of all these different science and environmental issues they're working on, and we'll be working with them to find that core of what's the simple story you can use to get across.
Yeah, you kind of get the best of both worlds with this life now.
That's what it's come down to.
Yeah. Dr. Randy Olson, Randy Olson Productions. Check it out. Some funny messages, but a good message as well.
Very serious.
All right. Have fun with the meeting this week.
Thanks.
We'll be right back.
All right.